I wonder, is there ever a struggle, and this might be a controversial question,
Really, it's about adapting how we think of education.
that we're doing so much to support the diverse learner that the quote-unquote typical learner might get left behind?
Explicit instruction so that we're not leaving anything up to chance.
Right.
If you were to take apart a machine and learn how the machine works, I really want to know how someone's brain works.
Welcome to Diversability, the podcast that explores neurodiversity by talking with those who work with, live with, and love individuals with neurodevelopmental conditions. Our aim is to highlight the strengths and discuss ways to support the stretches of those who live their lives outside the box. I'm really happy today to be talking with E.J Boyd. E.J is an inclusion support teacher with School District 68 in Nanaimo, British Columbia. She is a tireless advocate for both neurotypical and diverse learners, and is known to sometimes work outside her job description to help ensure that her students reach their full potential. I also consider her a good friend. Welcome, EJ. I'm so glad you're there.
Thanks for having me, Michelle.
Now, I did give a little Cole's notes about
Yeah.
your job, but I would love to hear a little bit more about your work.
I feel like our new name suits our position a lot better, so we're called an inclusion support teacher. That means that our role is varied, so we case manage for kids with diverse abilities and that happen to have an IEP. We also provide support academically, so I do reading intervention, math intervention. I provide a break space for kids who need a break. I provide an ear for kids to talk and I just listen to kids when they need some extra assistance. I also work with teachers to adapt their material, to figure out ways to meet the learners where they're at, and try and make sure that inclusion is brought up in the school as much as possible and show people what it looks like.
Yeah, that's so important at school levels right now, because
it
it's
is.
so important to be inclusive in a classroom, right? And meet people where they're at.
Yeah,
so
for
it's
sure.
such a valuable position. And I know you are that passion for advocating for students. What inspired you to do what you do?
Oh gosh. Originally, I actually anticipated working with deaf and hard of hearing students. That was my original intent, and that's sort of way back when I first got into teaching was kind of where I saw myself going. Many years ago, he's probably 27 he's about 29 now, 29 or 30. I had a student in my class that I still keep in touch with. He was 6 and he happened to have autism and high support needs, and at that time he was non-speaking. And I was fascinated because this child was an amazing artist, and he could draw pictures of dinosaurs and never have his pen leave the page.
Right.
And I just really wanted to know how his brain worked, and how do I reach him, and how do I teach him. And so I just started sort of snowballing from there. And so I grew. I ended up doing some work with him outside of school as well. I did respite for him, became friends with the family.
Wow.
Followed him, and then over the years that was just the kids I was drawn to.
It's so amazing, right, to see those different brains and how they work, and to really dig in and realize how much strength there is in behind what looks like is just so much struggle.
Yeah, exactly. And I have my own child too that has some diverse abilities and some learning needs, and I really wanted to find out ways to help my child as well.
Right.
But yeah, it's just I'm just curious. I love seeing how things work. It's like if you were to take apart a machine and learn how the machine works, I really want to know how someone's brain works.
Right. Yeah, oh, fantastic. What do you think are some of the biggest barriers that diverse learners face?
I think the biggest barrier is how our education system has been designed. So our education system currently, I think, is a bit outdated and was designed to create people who could go into workforce and become factory workers and office workers. And we still are a bit stuck in that old version of the education system. So I think really it's about adapting how we think of education and realizing that the one size fits all doesn't necessarily work anymore, just because we have so many unique people in our world. And just to be able to see how they can contribute to our society. So I think it's just generally the way the education system is designed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there seems to be so much push now to not fit one thing, like to be different, and it's okay and safe to identify your differences as well and not have to try and hide them.
Yeah.
And so to be able to allow those differences out and support them without, I wonder, is there ever a struggle, and this might be a controversial question, but that we're doing so much to support the diverse learner that the quote unquote typical learner might get left behind?
That is definitely a train of thought that I do hear a lot, and it pops up all the time. However, if I were to take architecture, and when we're designing a building, if we design a building with a ramp in it, then everybody can access the building.
Right.
And so if we were to think of education as the same thing in our daily teaching, if we're designing our lessons so that we can, everybody has access, and those adaptations are no longer adaptations but the norm,
Right.
then maybe we would have an easier time, and it wouldn't feel as daunting as it sometimes does doing the adaptations along the way.
Right.
Retrofitting.
Yeah, exactly. Earthquake proofing,
Yeah.
making it accessible.
Don't
to everybody.
retrofit, design from the ground up.
Exactly. Are there specific things that you feel you've done personally to try and overcome? I mean, I know you can't revamp the entire education system. Wouldn't that be great?
Yeah.
Maybe one day to move your way up. But are there specific things you feel in your role you can do to overcome the barriers you've seen?
I think probably the biggest one that I feel is the most important, and I've always, no matter what I was teaching, I've done this, and it's about relationship. So developing relationship and forming a team approach between the families and the school. I think that's probably the biggest thing that you can do. And then the other piece is just thinking creatively. How can I take this concept that's written down on paper and make it so it's not text heavy? And I don't think as teachers that we realize how text heavy we are in a classroom, and that's probably the biggest hurdle for kids. And I think teachers are coming alongside really nicely on things like brain breaks and movement breaks, but the print-rich classroom, which is great for everybody, but just kind of daunting for the kids that really struggle. I think that's the part that's the hardest. So for myself, I think it's building a solid relationship between the families and the teachers I work with, and trying to balance the two of them, and that it takes a village to raise a child in general. And so I think that's the biggest step, is just coming alongside each other and being creative and being flexible.
Now, that's already a pretty big team to have to corral.
Yeah.
How do you feel around, I selfishly ask, being able to create an even wider net around that child by connecting with community? So like their pediatrician, or if they've got a counselor, or if the family is getting like family support. How important and easy or difficult is it to create that wider net?
It's not difficult. You just need to know who you're contacting, and then making sure that you are bringing them in on all the important meetings. That's how I tend to operate. So I tend to have the more people around a child, the bigger their village. And so the more people I can bring in, the better. And I think that's only going to help the child. And I think the hardest part is just making sure that you make contact with all of the important people. And then just inviting them and having a sit-down meeting so that you have more of a wraparound approach. The importance of it, I can't stress enough how important that is, because you can't, just like you can't parent in isolation, you can't teach in isolation either. And the more people you have to draw on, because everybody offers their own strengths. Huge believer in OT support, counseling support, play therapy support. Like, I feel like all of those pieces, and when we can put all of our skills together, I think that's when we make an approach more cohesive for the child.
Now, I know as we're filming this,
Yeah.
IEP, or Individualized Education Plan,
is coming
up, which I know is a very busy time for you. So again, I appreciate your time here today.
No worries.
What advice do you have for the caregivers or the students to make that a really positive and beneficial process?
Number one, let's work from a strength-based approach. And I'm still learning, and so I'm still learning to change my language. I'm still learning to write from a strength-based approach, and I figure if I'm going to teach kids to be lifelong learners, I should probably be a lifelong learner too. So parents teach me a lot, kids teach me a lot. And I would say for the parents and caregivers, write out what your questions are at the IEP. Make a list of things you want to ask about ahead of time, and ask for a copy of your old IEP.
Nice.
So that you can edit it and have all your questions out and ready to go before you get there, because sometimes in the moment you forget what you want to say. And for the kids, I think the more we can involve the kids in their IEP and listen to what they're telling us, the more beneficial it is for all of us working with the student, because they feel empowered and we can learn a lot from just listening to the things that help them learn.
Totally. Do you have an age, like, well, maybe not that young, or would you even think like those youngest kids, those 5 and 6 year olds, do you think there's value having them part?
Only for a brief part of it for the little kids. And even when you're starting with the older kids, say around 11, not having to sit there for the whole entire time. Let them have the floor first.
Nice.
So say the first 15 minutes of the IEP, let the student have the floor and say, what are some things you want us to know about how you learn best? And then let them go. And I found that as time goes on, they have their ability to stay for the whole IEP grows, and they actually have lots of really good comments to add.
Nice.
And I've written in several comments into people's IEP that the students themselves have said, and I find them super useful.
Because then we're putting that child at the center of the process, right? Which is who we're supposed to be supporting.
And I actually asked a student, I said, hey, you know, we're having this meeting, it's called an IEP meeting, and would you like to be there? Well, of course I want to be there because it's about me.
Nice.
I'm like, okay. True.
That's going to be a good, that's going to be a good kid. Do that kid have ADHD? They're very determined and like to be in control, which is fantastic.
Yeah, no, they're like, of course I do. You know, this is about me. I should probably be there. I'm like, yeah, you're right. You should probably be there.
100%. Nice. Do you have sort of favorite strategies that you use to support kids either in the classroom or outside of the classroom?
If I'm looking at, say, reading intervention, for instance, and I would say this applies to math as well, explicit instruction so that we're not leaving anything up to chance.
Right.
And so really detailing what the skill that we want them to learn, break it down into its core components and teach those components.
Nice.
Outside of the classroom, I think choice. Making sure that kids have choice. Monitoring our asks. Think about your language and how you choose to ask your questions, and make sure that it's not demand-based. That's kind of the thing I've been working on, is changing my language so I'm not using demand-based language, and I find it works really, really well.
So more that declarative kind
more
of thing,
declarative
that
language.
Observational, let them sort of join in.
Even, you know, if we're cleaning up, I don't say, hey, it's time to clean up now. I choose my words a little bit better now, and I say, oh, don't forget, make sure all those little pieces from the Lego go in the bin again, just so no one steps on them and breaks them.
Right.
It's things like that, so that it's not a big ask and there's no resistance. So
giving kids a little bit of the why. Why we're asking, right?
Yeah,
because then they can actually really internalize. So do I want to do this? Does this make sense to me? It does, as opposed to someone just told me. And it's not great to just tell kids things because they tend to push back.
And I think for our neurodiverse learners, they have that more so that their world is tightly controlled by adults, and they feel that loss of control deeper sometimes, I think. And so to give them back a tiny little bit of the control works out in our favor.
Totally. Because we are trying to grow them into adults, right?
Exactly.
And that involves taking more and more responsibility for your choices and more independence. So that's fantastic.
I think so.
I know you don't just support kids and families, but as you said, you also support the teachers and staff at your school. What are some of the common misconceptions you feel you've had to correct amongst other teachers and staff over time?
I think the biggest one is won't versus can't. So the biggest one is they're being willful, they won't do it, they won't listen to me, they won't do their work, and then reframing that into can't. If they're not printing, there's probably a can't involved.
Right.
I can't do the actual printing. I can't do the math. I can't sit for long periods. So reframing the won't into a can't.
Yeah. And then hopefully putting a yet.
Yes.
At the end of that. So you can't yet, but maybe we will get you there
Yeah.
if you do the right.
So reframing it, and I think my biggest take home, I'm going to get it printed on a t-shirt and wear it around my school all the time. All behavior is communication.
Lovely. I say that so many times in my office. Behavior is communication. Your kid is telling you something and they don't have a way to say it with their words.
Yeah. So I would say it all the time to EAs. If we really think of it and we break it down into its core components, all behavior is communication. So what is that behavior trying to tell you? Mm-hmm. And then if we can actually analyze it and see what it is that they're avoiding or they don't want to do, then we can typically get to the can't piece. What is hard for them and why is it hard for them?
Right. Yeah. And I find it, for parents anyway, when I'm doing them, it's we got to get to what the behavior is, but it's not just us trying to guess. It's actually being curious and asking those kids. Like, I noticed when I asked you to do that, this happened.
Yeah.
Why? What do you think? What was going on for you? Like using those strategies? Because again, involving them in the process instead of adults just telling me, just helps them sort of open up and maybe see that ability to shift a little bit, which is tricky.
And just acknowledging the feelings. They're real. Those big feelings that you see coming out, they're real. And
there's nothing wrong with them.
Exactly. And not overreacting. And our first reaction oftentimes when we have behavior is to quell the behavior.
Right.
And so instead of quelling the behavior, let's not be reactive ourselves, but to get to a place of calm and then figure out why. Right. Like that fact-finding mission.
Yeah, exactly. I'm often saying the best way to control your child, first control yourself. Put on your oxygen mask. Take the break, whatever you need, and then allow those feelings out. There's nothing wrong with them. Do you have particular resources or things that you share either with your fellow teachers or other staff or with families that you find are really helpful for them to review on their own?
I do. I have... Because I tend to send out a lot of information, I actually created a Google Classroom that I share resources on. So I do send them out via email to my staff, things that I find really neat and really good resources that I find. And then I also created a Google Classroom to house them in so that people could access them quickly if they were curious about them.
Right.
And then for families, if they've met with me and they say, I have a need for this, and this, then I tend to send them out the resources. So for a lot of families, it's around those adaptations around written output, adaptations around reading. And so then parents need those tutorials because they don't necessarily know how to use Google Read and Write. They don't necessarily know how to use Google Classroom. So assuming that they can automatically figure those things out isn't good because the parents oftentimes don't know how to access certain resources. So if I send them out a tutorial alongside it, I also, if I see something neat that's happening in the community, I'll send that out to parents. If I see particularly good resources on Amazon, I'll send that out to parents or to teachers as well. So I try and whatever I come across that seems really interesting, I tend to ship it out.
Right. Nice.
To both parents and staff.
I know I learn a ton from my patients. I'm wondering what are some of the more memorable lessons your students have taught you?
Gosh, there's so many.
Too many to count.
There's so many to count. But I think in this past year, one of my students taught me a really important lesson around what's boring and why would I want to do it if it's boring. And so they said that their comment in the IEP meeting was, variety is the spice of life. So I actually wrote that down in the IEP because I found I'm like, okay, I agree, variety is the spice of life. Okay, wise words from a young soul. And so I think that's probably one of my biggest lessons is I watch them play. I watch what entertains them, but I listen to their words, right? And things like variety is the spice of life. I'm like, yeah, it really is. Because in all honesty, I've been teaching 30 on my 31st year. So I've been teaching for 31 years, and I have to say I don't do the same things year after year because I get bored. Even when I taught kindergarten, I would get bored, and I might repeat an activity, but I never did things in the same order.
Right.
I always looked for new things. It was never just pulling something out of my drawer and reusing it from year to year. Maybe that speaks to my own diversity, maybe neurospiciness. But yeah, I would get bored easily too. So I agree with the kids.
Yeah.
Variety is the spice of life.
Absolutely. And that's one thing when I'm counseling parents, like particularly with ADHD, right? What fires their brain? It's interest, intensity, and novelty. Because that visual schedule is great. But in 2 weeks, it's invisible and not seen anymore.
And they're not
they've lost the interest because they need it to change and shift
all the time.
And that kind of thing. At the same time, I often try to get parents to encourage boredom in the summer. To actually teach your kids how to be bored, because that's where creativity is going to come. Is they get a chance to not have their brain fed, then they will start to create those ideas and manifest.
Raised my own kids that exact same way. Mom, I'm bored. Good.
Keep doing that. Eventually you won't be anymore. And it wasn't good. And I often say, I'm not your cruise ship director, so you need to figure out something to change the boredom.
To do. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So raise my own children the same way, and boredom isn't necessarily a bad thing.
It's not a bad thing. Absolutely. I'm curious. As you mentioned, you've learned things from students, and you were inspired by students. What do you hope someone who's thinking back and someone says, "Oh, do you remember Miss Boyd?" What would be that success? What would be you think I was successful? What would you hope that adult would think when they were remembering you as their teacher?
That I cared about them. And actually, it's panned out that way over the years, because typically from year to year I get a phone call or two. I get a phone call or two from past parents saying, I just wanted you to know my child's doing this, 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 and this, and you were a really important part of their life. A year ago I had a student from kindergarten, and he'd always said that he wanted me at his graduation. His mom got a hold of me, and I went to his graduation, his grade 12 graduation. And and I've even had, younger people that have come into the school as EAs or teachers, and they're stopped in, they're like, "You're Miss Boyd." I'm like, yes I am.
Yes, I am.
So in all honesty, I don't think anything matters more. The curriculum doesn't matter. But how you made someone feel. I would want someone to say, "You made me feel good. You made me feel like I mattered, and I had a connection."
Right.
So I think that's more important than anything. Yeah.
I will say, when people come into my office and kids come and say, "Oh, yeah, Miss Boyd is whatever," I'm like, "Miss Boyd's a friend of mine." "You know Miss Boyd?" And they're just so happy. So I hear nothing but you are helpful from the kids that know you. So
connection's important. My other big one around all behavior is communication. My other big one that I need on a shirt that I tell people all the time is connection before redirection. And so they asked me, what can I do in the first 2 months of school? I said, form a connection. And then you can start working on the redirection piece. But until you form a connection with that student, it's not going to happen. Not going to happen. So relationship is everything. And relationship with parents too. Because you can go a long way building a team if you make time for parents, sit down, hear their concerns, and validly include them in your day-to-day planning. And someone says, parent says, I have an idea for this, and you're like, okay, that sounds good, let's do that. And then actually using that idea, and I think that makes them feel like they're part of the team, rather than we're just writing this piece of paper and this IEP and their thoughts and ideas aren't validly acknowledged.
Like that teacher versus parent. Right? But in fact, you're all around that child.
Exactly.
Make them included.
It needs to be a definite wraparound, and everybody works together as a team, including people like yourself. And I think, periodically over the years we've reached out about common kiddos, and I don't think there can be anything without everybody getting together.
Absolutely.
And supporting.
It's always helpful when there's that team mentality, and I know I can say, do I have permission to talk to Ms. Boyd? Yes, you do. Great. Then I know we're going to be able to put something that's really
together. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's no, I always believed it when my kids were small, you can't parent in isolation.
No.
So building a community around you is super important. Same with teaching kids that are diverse, even more so. They just need that extra cushion, extra support.
Absolutely. Well, our community is very fortunate to have you within it, and our neurodiverse kids thrive because you've been there to help them.
Thank you.
Thank you everybody for tuning in to Diversability, and so grateful to have EJ here to chat with us and gain so much insight on how to support our kids in school. Tune in for future episodes where we continue to talk with people who work with, live with, and love individuals with neurodiverse conditions so that we can help them be the best that they can be.
Thanks for having me.
Bye!